Hello, welcome to Aruba Atmosphere 2017. My name is Tom Hollingsworth, and I am a part of Tech Field Day. We are here with a group of invited delegates to take part in a roundtable discussion all about mobility and wireless and some of the exciting things that we've heard here while we're at the conference. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please make sure you check out our website at techfieldday.com. You can also see our YouTube channel at youtube.com/techfieldday. I'd like to take a moment for the panelists and delegates to introduce themselves to the audience at home. Keith, why don't you go ahead and start?
Keith Parsons with Wireless LAN Professionals. I do Wi-Fi. You can find me on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. My website's wlanpros.com.
Shaun Neal with Brickworks, and you can find me on Twitter at SV_Neal, or my blog, blog.svneal.com.
Sam Clements, social media blogger at sc-wifi.com, where you can find me on Twitter at Samuel_Clements.
Blake Krone, you can find me with no dashes, underscores, or anything crazy like that, because I like to make it easy. BlakeKrone.com and at Blake Krone on Twitter.
Eddie Forero, Communica One. I have a blog at badfi.com, and I'm on Twitter at Hey Eddie.
I'm Joshua Williams, a Wi-Fi practitioner in the middle of the country. You can find me online at 802.me or at 802.me.
I'm Ryan Adzima, at Adzima on Twitter, wireless engineer and blogger.
I'm Drew Lentz with Frontier Consulting. You can find me on Twitter at wirelessnerd or at wirelessnerd.net.
All right, so as we record this on March 1st, 2017, we saw a really great demo at the keynote today where Aruba decided to upgrade all the APs in the middle of production. And a bunch of the engineering folks in the room immediately just kind of went, you're doing this? But it worked. It was a very wonderful demo. And then yesterday, February 28th, we saw what happens when the cloud goes bad, and a certain large retailer's compute infrastructure decided to just take the afternoon off.
Take a beer.
We spend a lot of time building resilient infrastructure for our users to be able to use Wi-Fi anywhere they want, and so far the Wi-Fi has actually been working really well here at Atmosphere. But as we start moving more and more of the decision-making into the cloud, as we start offloading a lot of that capability to other places that we don't control, how can we as Wi-Fi engineers build resilient infrastructure that we're not going to get the finger pointed at us when somebody else is really at fault?
Use contractors.
Contractors?
Yeah.
Wow, that was the quickest discussion ever.
Right.
Point at.
Now,
And you made an assumption there that you're not going to get the finger pointed at you. You're wireless. You're the finger's pointing at you no matter what you do. Yeah. So you just accept the fact that's not going to happen.
That's true, but what the counterpoint to that is, think about how many systems we saw go down yesterday that we actually didn't even know relied on S3 to work. My favorite point from yesterday is that the red button that would have told the world that S3 was down, the button was hosted on S3. And so you kind of sit back and you think about it and you're like, oh, wow, that would have made a whole lot of sense. But that's something that's kind of outside of our purview. What happens if your Wi-Fi planning tool goes down? What happens if the analytics that are telling you that Peter Lane is using up all the bandwidth all of a sudden go away? I mean, how can we plan for that? Can we plan for that? Or is this just this problem we can't deal with?
Redundancy upon redundancy upon redundancy. The bigger you build, it's a give and take. How much do you want to spend on the infrastructure? How important is it? And how many different locations can you put it in? That's about all you can do. And don't run upgrades during conventions.
See, no, the upgrades during the convention was interesting because today I took over the Aruba Networks handle before the keynote, and Peggy came over right before it started, and she whispered in my ear, and I'm trying to figure out, I'm like, did you just say what I think you just told me you're going to do? You're going to do a live update during a keynote, which is something that all of us sitting up here and all of you listening to this would freak out at if your manager
plus
said,
the cluster failover.
Yeah, do it
simultaneously.
Plus the cluster failover. And I'm trying to come up and I'm like, okay, I have to be politically correct because I'm doing this from a company handle. The first thing I thought of, and I sent this to everybody else, was I'm like, did we just challenge S3 to be like, hey, hold my beer and watch what's going to happen here and see what goes on? Because this is really dangerous to do, but like Ryan said, is you can have enough redundancy to cover yourself for these scenarios, but it comes at a steep price.
So let me turn that question on its head, because this is something we were discussing after the keynote but before this session. So it's one thing to do it during a conference, right? Okay, guys, the Wi-Fi went down for a couple minutes while we were switching APs. What happened if we do it in a hospital surgery room when someone's doing telemedicine?
I struggle with the criticality of this. Sorry, I just want to say one thing on this real quick. The criticality of wireless is how you define the criticality of wireless to be. So yes, that's life and death, but every scenario could be life and death to someone.
It would have been life and death
Using
today.
unlicensed spectrum for life and death
That's scary in
is
its own.
suicide.
So what you're telling me is that no consumer in their right mind would ever do that.
Oh, no,
I
I'm
don't
not
believe
saying
you.
that.
Wink,
No,
wink,
they'll
nudge,
absolutely
nudge.
I'm saying it happens everywhere, but we advise against it.
That's why we have the FDA, right? The
Sorry, Josh.
FDA does
Josh has a point here. I want to let him get to it.
So, I have a large customer that is an Aruba customer.
What's your name, Josh?
Yeah,
We'll blur that out later.
they're probably listening. And very happy with the solution, but what they're getting is, and not only can we add protection with redundancy upon redundancy, to your point, right? But now we can give them more benefit out of that redundancy with some of the features in OS 8.1, with the ability to do firmware upgrades, controller upgrades, and that sort of thing in a production environment. Because today, it's very expensive and difficult to do that without disrupting what is going on in that emergency room, in the OR, and that sort of thing. Now, we can design around that. We can, from a controller perspective, from an AP perspective, and that sort of thing. But this adds a lot of flexibility that my customers are really looking forward to, because, like it or not, whether we should be running, life support equipment off of 2.4 or 5 gigahertz. To some degree it happens, but probably more critically, there is that political layer of things where the expectation is we're going to have a 24/7 functional operational environment in this hospital. And to go ask, for a 2-hour window of downtime at 2 o'clock in the morning is not just asking a lot of the IT staff. I mean, let's be fair, but is politically asking a lot from the hospital administration.
So, we saw this work in, for all intents and purposes, a fully production environment. Granted, they had every engineer on it that they could, and I'm sure the devs were standing by just in case. But this was a test. This is still beta. If we're able to do this in production environments, this doesn't just change how we do upgrades. This changes the expectations of wireless networks. The expectation has always been, and what we've always told our customers is, no, you get downtime, then we do updates, we test, and you bring it back up. And that's it. If this works, we don't get that anymore.
Shaun.
Yeah, I just want to chime in on the healthcare side, right? I think, and to Ryan's piece here, that expectation does start to change, right? And I've done a lot of different healthcare projects, and there's so much effort that goes into the communication side with the business that I think something like this ends up simplifying, right? I mean, I still wouldn't advocate doing it at, whenever you feel like it kind of thing, but it still probably happened during the least impactful windows. But I definitely think it's going to simplify a lot of the business side of the communications. I mean, we spend 2 weeks planning on how we're going to communicate a specific outage to, different business units within a hospital organization, and how each one of those is going to handle that downtime, right? And it's an amazing amount of time that's being spent.
Sam?
But is from what I gathered this morning, that's a feature of AOS 8.
Yeah.
That's enabled. So it's not, it's there. You don't have to go in and specify that window. It's just by default you come in, and I don't know if it's set by default. That's just kind of shooting from the hip, but it's there. It's integrated into the components. Whether or not you want to schedule that window, I'm assuming that there's a way to do it, but it's just going to start working from here on out.
I think, well, I'm sorry.
How many people put $500 tires on a 79 Pinto? I see a lot of
bought a
healthcare
79
environments.
Pinto?
I see a lot of healthcare
Florida?
environments though that they have all these massive expectations on the Wi-Fi network, and they're plugging them into a switch port that you're going to need to upgrade the code on that switch at some point.
Yep.
And how do you there's not a logical extension to the expectations for Wi-Fi reliability and availability that extends through all the other parts of the network. And I see there's this great emphasis put on Wi-Fi infrastructure, but not all the systems that go to support it on the back end.
Yeah,
I mean, you still have to maintain all of those components. What happens when you upgrade a UPS? You got to shut everything down. Well, so I see that being a double-edged sword. And I think that that's going to drive more emphasis on all of the supporting systems about when are we going to get a functional ISSU for switches where we can actually have a switch port that doesn't go down despite the fact that I've upgraded code on that switch. I think we're a really, really long way away from that.
Well, this is where the redundancy of multi-homed APs, all that other stuff comes in. Redundancy upon redundancy upon redundancy.
Eddie and then Keith.
No, I was going to say, I mean, this was a full-on demo, right? They did this this is not normal procedure, and I'm sure Aruba will never recommend to do this in the middle of 2,000 people in the middle of a conference. They did it purely as a demo to show, look, this is not the way you're going to normally do it, but isn't this cool? You have 2,000 people here with all these devices, and we were still able to do a code update. I think what they're going for obviously is there are certain businesses that you just have very small windows, or you have certain businesses that have very specific windows, like schools, right, or colleges and stuff. We can't do the upgrade until the break, spring break or Christmas break or whatever it is. Now you can say, well, we can do it over the weekend because we know we can do these live updates, things like that. So I think that's more where we're going with this. But to your point, I think, it's like there's always got to be the first person who does it, and then the rest of the industry eventually follows. So.
Well, I'd like to follow on what Stan was saying about the switches. I think something we're missing is so many of our Wi-Fi infrastructures, it's layer one that's failing. Mm-hmm. We have a poorly designed, ill-equipped, ill-designed network, and because 802.11 is so extremely resilient, it works. And then when it's just barely working and people are saying, oh, Wi-Fi sucks, it's slow because the design allowed it to go slow. At WOPC, we had a thing we sent out with people with air checks, and from over 1,000 sites, over 55% are still supporting 1 meg data rates. Well, that physical layer piece, no matter what we do up here with the fancy, we handle the cluster failover while we're upgrading. Yeah, but we're still supporting 1 meg data rates. That's still going to make the Wi-Fi look bad no matter what we do. So the political layer is still going to go, yeah, it's still slow.
And I think that goes back to the original question that you were talking about. When AWS went down, right, or when there's a DHCP. Let's talk about the AWS issue. When it went down, and there were people here that were trying to get on websites. Do you think that they immediately thought, oh, it's got to be Server East? They thought, no, something's wrong with the Wi-Fi. Yeah. That's what they thought. Regardless of where or why, I think that was the misconception. That's one of the things I like about, to touch back on the machine learning thing, is when you look at some of the features, the Niara features and some of the things that are coming out, the ability to segment out where the problems in the network are and say, hey, look, here's what was going on. This had nothing to do with the wireless. Here's what was happening. I think that that's an extremely important component of where AOS is going and where Central's going. But again, back on the question of how do we protect ourselves from that? We can show data. I think data is very important where we say, hey, it's not us, but not us doesn't make the customer happy. Not us still has an unhappy customer.
So I want to make a point here because you guys, I heard the word change window a lot. I heard the word, outage window where we could upgrade things. I don't know if you in the wireless world are aware of this, but it's all the networking people's fault. Everything, including the fact that it takes 2 or 3
Actually, no,
weeks.
it's not your fault. It's our fault.
No, it's
always our fault.
Actually, no, I was
Wireless.
specifically blamed for this.
Oh, okay.
It takes 2 to 3 weeks to get a switch port provision, and that's just unacceptable in today's CI/CD DevOpsy world of it needs to happen now. Do you see this idea that Aruba is putting forth with AOS 8 and the ability to do hitless controller upgrades across an entire infrastructure to kind of roll forward into the DevOps mentality of change all the things. And it's like, you know what, we need to increase, we need to put an engineering special on the controller codes and the APs to be able to support the new app that we're rolling out next week because the CEO really wants to be able to check his golf scores when he's in the toilet.
Not if they're using ITIL.
ITIL. That's what you do with the thing when you're plowing up the field, right?
I think it depends. There's a lot of other features of AOS 8 that will allow us to run various versions across controllers throughout the environment and anchor different applications or SSIDs or run traffic uniquely through the network based on that. So it may become more like a playground where we can try things like that.
We were doing
but you gotta-
DevOps before DevOps was cool.
We were.
We were hipster DevOps, let's be honest.
Wait, how long has networking been talking about SDN?
What year is this?
How long has wireless been doing SDN?
Since its inception with controllers. And,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys put a fancy name on it. We actually do it.
Wow.
Where's a mic? Because I want to drop it.
No, we don't try.
I agree.
Sean, you had a point here.
Yeah, so I think you talk about that sort of the DevOps piece. We definitely saw some components of AOS 8 even at the last tech field day we did up in Sunnyvale with Aruba. There's definitely a component of it where it's, hey, we can dynamically spin up additional controllers. So it could be talk about the campus environment, right? Saturday it's football day, right? All of a sudden we're going to have where our football stadium's empty. All of a sudden there's 100,000 people in a dense area. Dynamically spin up a couple controllers to handle that load and tear them down, when everyone goes home, right? So there's definitely an aspect of that plays into everything else we've talked about. We can understand that, hey, this actually does work for us because we go back to our machine learning data and we're saying, hey, this is working. So I think there is a piece of that. Some of that nirvana, probably not yet, but.
Anyone else thoughts?
I was going to say, with anything, especially like in Wi-Fi, we're very used to this. When a new feature comes out, in those early days, it is abused badly, right? So it's like when AC came out, every AP is 80 megahertz by default, and then everyone's upset. Why does the Wi-Fi suck? It's because you're using 80 megahertz channels. You shouldn't be using 80 megahertz channels. So, but it's a feature. We want to use it. It's the same thing with all this stuff. It's a feature and you want to use it, but I think it's important for, Aruba as one of the first to come out of the gate with something like this to, from the beginning, really lay down the law and say, look, this is a feature. It's cool. Consider the implications. This is when it, use it for these scenarios, that type of thing. Same thing with 80 megahertz, and that was something that really no vendor did when it came out, right? They just came out of the gate and just said, everything's default 80, and you got to figure out why it's not working. I don't think we should do that with going forward.
Well, balancing consumerization of IT and the competitive differentiator that all manufacturers have to use to compete against each other, right? Is you got the consumers who are bringing the latest and greatest device they got for Christmas or their birthday or fill in the blank, and they want to drive it as fast and as hard as they can on their home network. And the reality is when they get into the enterprise space, it just doesn't work the same. The two are just entirely different boxes. And then you balance that with the competitive differentiators that vendors are always trying to struggle against each other about, and there's never a happy medium. We can't say, here's a new feature, yet maybe pump the brakes on it, because there's always going to be those folks who are saying, oh, I got the newest, latest, and greatest BlackBerry that supports 320 megahertz wide channels. Let's go, all right? And it's just, it's, right.
What's a BlackBerry?
I know.
Unicorn?
It's in a 79 Pinto.
Notice the problem with BlackBerry,
$500
not
tires.
320 megahertz wide channels.
Because one of those things is imaginary and the other one involves megahertz.
Right. So the point is that you're always going to struggle with that, and no matter how many disclaimers we put on whatever box it is we shove out the door, you're going to have people selling features that ought not be implemented, and you're going to have people implementing features that ought not be sold.